Now that everyone has been educated, I hope we're now inspired to catch that virus. We're now going to take it to the question and answer portion of the program. We'll take any questions from the audience now. Anyone have a question for anyone on the panel? Okay, you can go ahead and stand up and project so everyone can hear you. State your name first, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Hale. I'm a graduate student here in the social work program. This question is for Dr. West. Dr. West, you said it took 16 years to return back to Sierra Leone. Did you go back to the same village and have things changed? If so, how did this impact your work?
I did go back to the same village. I had the opportunity, my best friend Adama is from Sierra Leone. Her mother passed. And 30 days as a part of the ceremony in Muslim culture, you go to celebrate. We celebrated by feeding 500 people in her mother's area. And we also fed people in my village. We bought big bags of rice and different things, and we had a conversation and talked about possibility of doing things in the future, because I know I have to return. I have some unfinished business there in the village. And it changed, the village changed, and to be honest, some people weren't alive, and children had grown. The pictures you saw, they were children when I was there, and now they have children. And so it was really nice to see that and to hear them just say, Adamao! So, it's still evolving. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Right here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead and stand up and state your name, please.
Yes, my name is Serena McCarty, and I'm a graduate student for the social work program here at GSU. And my question is for Dr. Dunham. When you are trying to take care of yourself, how can you best accomplish this in the middle of a chaotic situation in your family or community?
I think where you have to remember is what is most important, and have you prioritize those things to say, what is it that I need to put first? What are the things that need to be put to the side, and so I can deal with those things? So when you're dealing with a chaotic experience, you have to go back to the original coping strategies that you've used in the past to help you get to the next level. And then you tackle that next. Then you tackle the next one next. So remember what you've used to help you get through other challenging times in your life.
Thank you.
A question in the front. Go ahead.
This question is to anyone on the panel. If I want to try to bring about positive change in my community or get engaged in leadership and activism, what do you think my first step should be?
I would say, from my own experience is first you have to know your environment. So that's number one. Number two is read up on what is most important to you based off your value set. And then make that your vehicle in choosing what you want to do. Like my activism is mental health. So that kind of fits with my value set in terms of making a difference in my community through the mental health vehicle. So I think those are the two things that I would suggest that you start with. Reading up, looking at your own values, your personal and your interpersonal, and make sure that you use the vehicle that is most important that you can identify with.
Thank you.
I would add to that, it's important to find your tribe. Find like-minded people, because sometimes we can feel so alone. But if you see someone else wanting to act upon what you're doing or what you're interested in, go meet, do a meetup. They have meetup groups, all sorts of places, and then you won't feel alone. And it's a great place to start, because then you found your tribe. I like to, especially on social media, when you talk, Michael, about digital, there's a place for everyone.
I think Michael brought up a point that cannot be understated, which is we have to know our history and ourselves. And there's this brilliant blogger who writes about the reductive seduction of other people's problems. And that we have these deep convictions and this deep sense of care about something, and then we would jump in without fully understanding. And when we do that, we risk oversimplifying, distancing, and not truly connecting with others. So I loved this idea of how do we become to know the complexity of the issues that we want to address, because I think that combined with relationships and tribe and self-care all work together to actually push us forward.
And just to summarize, too, you definitely just want to become informed on the issue at hand. Especially in today's time, there's a lot of just false information out there. So, pretty much if you're knowledgeable about the whatever the subject is, and you can spread that knowledge, that's by itself, social activism. And that's by itself making a difference, because you're educating somebody, if not one or 1,000, you're educating somebody who did not know what they didn't know until you told them about it. And I would say within the local areas, really just getting engaged in local politics. I think that's something that we have to reinvest in. And that's all of us. Really understanding our municipalities, our counties, and the legislators that's flowing through our towns, because there's a lot of things on every level of government that people should be involved in.
So I think what we're all saying is just take the step. Just take the step.
I dare you.
For anyone on the panel, Dr. Dunham, you talked about self-care, right? And so even as Dr. West had traveled over to Africa in that time of turbulence, and even as Michael talks about his activism, I'm assuming, mostly in the city of Chicago and everything that's going on there. When you think about self-care, right, how do you justify, because sometimes these situations can be dangerous that you find yourself in. So some of us may find ourselves frozen from fear to be an activist in those certain situations. So how did you all find ways to be able to say, you know what, I am going to take care of myself, but I'll go out into this area anyway and be an activist anyway, even with those challenges there?
You want to take that one because it kind of relates to.
Because I'm always in something. I'm always protesting somewhere. I return to what the panel discussed about when you talk about self-care. Part of self-care is self-awareness, number one. You need to understand and know your own needs. And when we're talking local and all, especially with all the protests that are going on, and you investigate and know what you're going into, and you always know who are you going with, what is the temperament of that person, is it well thought out, who are your colleagues, do you have the same values? Because if you have the same values, you're going to have the same strategy just in case something does not feel right. You're like, well, you know what, this doesn't feel right. Maybe we need to step away from this. Or maybe we need to move out of this. Or develop a strategy, whatever that strategy is. But first and foremost, intuitively, you know if you shouldn't be somewhere. Or if you should.
I would like to add to that looking at 3 things that I think guide my life in making decisions in terms of leadership and activism is value, purpose, and passion.
Yes.
And let those guide you, and it will decrease your fear. If you understand your values, your purpose, and your passion, it will help guide you through difficult situations. I remember, going into urban areas where it was really low socioeconomic status and working with youth. And I understood that, when I walked in, I had to go into their culture and say, hey, I'm not a threat. I'm here to be positive change, to connect with you, and you tell me your story and let me be a part of your story. So I told them my values, my purpose, and my passion was to make an impact.
I would say for me, it's as being a college student and doing advocacy, it's really just managing your time. That's the main thing. Figuring out when you can be effective and just being responsible with that. There's been times where I've rallied back to back to back weeks, and it didn't really affect my grades. And there was other times where I went to 2 rallies in 2 weeks, and it was like, man, I shouldn't have did that. So you just have to be responsible, really, with your time. Know what you can do and what you can't do. I don't think anybody in here has a cape. Nobody's Superman, Superwoman. So don't try to be. I think that's the main thing, especially when you're just starting to be an activist and get into advocacy. It's easy to get carried away with, we're going to save the world today. It's not going to take a day. You're going to put some time in for that. So really just, value your time. That's first and foremost. I mean, if you're a student, more than likely, your studies is first and foremost, and then everything else is second. So just realizing, good time management.
Nice.
I had a mentor who once asked a question that I've never forgotten, and she asked, what are you willing to risk for that which you love? What are you willing to risk for that which you love?
Yes.
And I realized in my life I was taking risks that were differential to people I loved. So my level of risk wasn't as high, and I wasn't stepping up. And so I needed to challenge myself around, why am I taking risks sometimes and why am I not? And that helped give me a real clear sense of grounding to say, here's where I'm going to engage. And I can't engage with everything, but I can focus here and amplify here. And, I think we're always developing around these. And the thing that is resonating with me now is back to the self-care, particularly given our current climate. And we interviewed this brilliant activist and educator, Georgie Torres Reyes, and she talks about having to find her sustainable, renewable resource, because she is on fire when it comes to activism. Her convictions and what she's willing to risk is so much. But what she also tells us is we have to think about the way in which fire both burns and gives heat and life and energy, but also consumes.
Yes.
And we have to be able to be there tomorrow and the next day and the day after.
Right.
That's a challenge for me. I'm trying to figure out what that looks like.
Okay. State your name and project.
My name is Tara, and I'm a graduate student in the social work program. And my question is to everyone, what quality is most important to develop as a leader?
I'm thinking back to when I grew up, and don't let the light skin and the PhD fool you, okay? I grew up poor, and I remember something that my mentor told me is that if you have passion, your light will shine bright. So I think it is passion. What is it that you really and truly love is a great quality. I think it's many qualities, but I think passion will keep you from burning out. I think passion will keep you focused on service and who you are there to impact. So I would say one of the great assets to being a leader is definitely passion.
For one of the research studies I work with, we have surveyed over 500,000 college students now in 6 countries, 300 colleges and universities over 10 years. And the thing that comes up over and over and over again is the single greatest predictor of leadership competence is a person's ability to engage about and across difference, to express empathy, to see where someone's at, not to give up someone's stance, but to see the humanity in someone else. And that leads to social perspective taking, resilience, agency, all of these benefits. I think the flip side for me of that is when you do you and you don't conform to a set of external standards, you're practicing leadership.
That's a part of what I believe. I believe that leadership is developed out of authenticity. You have to love yourself so much that you're comfortable in your own skin and you're unapologetic about who you are. And with that, while respecting others, clearly. And if you are grounded in who you are, the rest will take care of itself. Because you're going to, the more you love and respect yourself, that love is going to pour out to other people and everybody you touch. And they'll see that light.
I think what all leaders have to do in order to be great leaders is to, number one, it's an honesty factor. You really have to be truly honest with whoever you're working with. Number one, yourself, and then whoever else you're trying to persuade to work with you. And with that, you have to walk the walk. I can't say anything. I can't say, hey, I fight for higher education, and then next second I'm talking about forget school. I can't do that. I can't say that I'm here for my race and then say, I'm tired of certain black people doing this. Can't do that. You have to really model what you really want to expect from other people. You have to be that living proof. And that's something that, again, doesn't happen overnight. You have to continuously work at that. But that's something that, as a leader, you should strive to be, because if you really want others to follow that path, you have to be that walking example of that path. So I just think, honestly, it's something that leaders have to be fully 100%. You have to be fully 100% honest with yourself and everybody else.
Yes.
Okay, we have another question here. Stand up and project. State your name.
My name is Simone Jones. I'm an undergraduate for community health, and my question is for Michael. You mentioned that to make yourself visible. What are steps that I can take to make myself visible while in the process of trying to improve my self-care?
Well, the first thing you can do is when there's, a protest or a rally, if whatever your interest, you can just show up. You can just be a participant, whether you just have a sign or I've been to, I'm not going to say which president, but a certain president got elected. I've been to a lot of his rallies, and oftentimes I have no sign or anything. I'm just there. I'm just there in support. And that's good enough sometimes, because you never know. You might meet somebody there who may need your support, and you might be there for them. But, to get going is, just pick the time. There's always a time, or even, again, digital activism is another great thing. You can share your voice. I don't know how many friends you got on social media, but if you have like 1,000, all 1,000 of them can hear you talk about a certain topic whenever. You can share your voice. So really just picking the time that works best for you. If you have a lot of obligations that makes your time very restrained, well, what you can do is, like we said, start becoming knowledgeable on the subject that you want to see that change happen. And once you start becoming knowledgeable, oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, oh man, maybe if this policy change, more people can be in better position. Once you start doing that, then, like I said, talk to people one-on-one, small groups, you're making a difference right there. Little do you know. So it's not necessarily the people you see on TV throwing chairs and having a riot, or people sitting in. Those are extreme examples. Those are very in-your-face examples, but there's a lot of subtle ways to do it and to be effective.
I really like what he talks about. The starting part is as simple as joining social media. Look at a Facebook page that represents some of the values that you have. Create your own network in terms of what your values are and sharing that with other people. One of the things that I do is I participate on many, Facebook pages, but in terms of self-care, I make sure that I don't take anybody's view personal, because it can get really ugly quickly, and it creates anxiety, it creates stress, especially with how media is. You have to sift through the truth, the rhetoric. You have to sift through that can cause you to have anxiety and stress. So I say start with, Facebook page, joining those things that matter to you, create your own, page that, represents some of the things that are most important to you. And remember, in that self-care place, is don't take it personal. You have a view, other people have a view, and sometimes listen to the view, although 90% of it may be different. There could be 10% that makes you say, I never thought about that, and I can take that and make a change.
Other question here? Okay, stand up and project your name, please.
My name is Jacqueline, and this question's for Dr. Dugan. I understand that this is the 20th anniversary of the social change model of leadership. Has the model or how it's applied changed through the years?
Sure. So the model, I think is important to note, was created by a coalition of folks. And that included students, faculty, community leaders who came together to say, what would it look like for us to engage in leadership and mirror that process in the construction of this model? And in its initial inception, it has largely held, meaning that people have been able to measure it, people have been able to use it and translate it to action and practice. We have refined it, I would say. So part of our research has gone into say, okay, these dimensions of the model are really important, but is there something else there? And typically that something else has been a critical lens, recognizing that how we come to understand self-awareness is a function of our social location. Race, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, all of that. And if we just say, let's be self-aware, we are satisfying ourselves with simplicity. And we have to go much deeper. Similarly, agency, the ability to engage in social perspective taking, thinking about social generativity or our care or concern, that connected humanity, are all parts of the model that we've sort of pieced in since its original inception, as we've become a little more critical about what it means to engage in social action.
Good deal. Okay, you wanna stand up? Another question in the, oh,
So, my name is Jawan, and I have a question for Michael. How would you handle friends you have had for a long time, but they just aren't traveling the path like going to school? Should you try to change them or leave them?
I mean, ultimately, going back to self-care, you gotta do what's best for you in terms of progressing your life. Now, I mean, this situation has happened to me. I've had friends who I don't talk to as much anymore. Yeah, you have to do what's best for you in terms of progressing. In terms of social activism, I mean, usually what you're fighting for is what you're passionate about, and you're going to fight for it regardless. So if your friends are not for that and they actually discourage it, I don't think they're your friends. I don't consider them my friends. If I'm fighting for my race, I'm fighting for higher education, they tell me, oh, that's stupid. Why are you doing that? I don't think we can talk no more. I don't think we can be friends. So, yeah, you really have to do what's best for you. And ultimately, you want to encourage your friends to get on board with you. If they are not willing to do that, you might have to let them go. I mean, that's just real life. I think everybody loses friends at some point. I don't know anybody who had the same friends since first grade to like 90 years old. I never heard anybody talk about that. Outside of Dr. West, well, you know how amazing she is. So, I mean, that's expected. But I mean, everybody else, you may even lose a friend or two. But you shouldn't sacrifice what you believe in and what you're passionate about for your friends. So.
And I'd add to that with your passion, people are either going to draw to you or they're going to draw away from you.
Yes.
So part of that is you'll start to see that on your trajectory, and because of your value shift, and the more that you shift, you're going to pull in people whose values and views are very similar to yours, and those that aren't are going to find you interesting anyway. What are you guys going to talk about? What are you guys going to, not going to go to a rally together because your values are different. So you'll start to see that happen in your life as those that, are passionate about what your passion is, they'll pull into you, and those who are not will pull away from you.
And I would say both and, right? This is a lonely road. Education sometimes is remember when you're doing that homework at night? It's a lonely road, right? You're in the cave and you and God or Allah or whoever you believe in is in the cave with you. That's the journey. When you're passionate about something, sometimes you will feel alone. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to give up your friends. I have friends from various walks of life, from vice lords on the west side to PhDs sitting on the panel with me. And I love them equally, and I think that's the beauty of social media. It brings together a world that ordinarily wouldn't have dialogue and the opportunity to even have a conversation, and we get to learn from each other. And hopefully, if they're friends, they're going to admire what you do and celebrate you, even if they choose differently.
We have one last question for the day here in the back. So project your voice.
Hi, my name's Beth Wetzel, and I had a question for people who are just starting their career in mental health or in social work. What is the best advice you could give them?
We love this question. The best advice we give, pretty much we talked about a part of it, right? You have to, a part of what we're about that self-awareness and that self-care, underneath all that is doing your work. There's work we must do. In order to do no harm to others, we must be vigilant about doing our own internal work. And it's work, and it's hard, right? And sometimes it even gets messy, right? Even in telling this story and sharing this with you guys, there are a number of times in rehearsing, I just wanted to cry because it's bringing up some old wounds for me, having to leave, right? We just get used to that. You get used to those areas that you really don't want to visit. You get used to once you go there, you're like, I'm gonna dig in the rut of this, and if I need to get some help, I'm gonna get some help, but I'm not going to ignore this wound. Because as you heal, you'll develop more tools to walk with someone else on their journey without harming them.
Anyone else want to address that question before we wrap up?
You psychologists want to address that question?
Go ahead.
I think you just did a perfect job, so I was like so riveted. I wasn't even thinking about
all
what
I
to
could
say.
come
I
up
was
with more
like,
passion.
can I write that down? Okay, so there is a quote, and there was a whole marketing campaign for targeting, particularly isolated LGBTQ plus kids around It Gets Better. And I had a real problem with that campaign, and I couldn't really figure out what it was. And I think I eventually came to the place that it doesn't necessarily always get better at the rate we expect it to. We develop more coping skills to deal with what is thrown at us. And when we pretend that it's just going to automatically get better, we can create a false reality. And someone risks internalizing that there's something wrong with me, right? And I think that happens just as much for the people we work with as it does for ourselves. When we're trying to change bureaucratic systems, to work with folks, when we're trying to help people navigate systems that seem stacked against them. And so I keep wanting to remind myself that it does get better, but that rate of change is often not at the pace that's acceptable to me. And I have to own that it's not acceptable to me versus internalizing it.
Let's thank our audience, our panel, please. Dr. West, Dr. Dugan, Dr. Dunham, and Mr. Michael Benarsdale. We thank you guys for your questions and your participation today. This was great. Again, it's our 4th installment. So again, please check our hashtag R2V4ACT, and also check us out on the web, responseaboutus.com. So again, one last round of applause.